Hey everyone! Before we get started on my very basic tote, I wanted to give you an idea of how I cut my pieces for the exterior and lining because there is no pattern for this particular tote. It's measurements based on how big, small, or deep I want the bag. So let's pretend that this rectangular piece of paper is a piece of fabric that we want to use for the exterior of our tote. This would be, in my case, vinyl. I love to use vinyl as my exterior, faux leather, leather. I love to use waterproof canvas as my interior because when I do that, not only do I like the look of those things and the feel of them, but I don't have to interface anything. Really, you'll see what I do in the video. It's a lot less work to stabilize and support this bag. So let's pretend we have this rectangle of vinyl for our exterior, and I have a favorite size that I tend to gravitate towards for my totes, but again, any size can be made based on your measurements. For me, I tend to gravitate towards cutting a piece of vinyl that is approximately 25.5 inches on the long side and 15 inches on the short side, okay? This is going to be the entire exterior of the bag. We're not going to need more than one piece. So we cut this giant piece, and what we do is we also cut the same thing for the lining. They're going to be the exact same piece, just different material. We cut it, and then we're going to fold short edges to short edges like this. And what we're looking at here is what's going to be the front of the tote and the back of the tote, the two main exterior pieces, okay? But we still need a bottom and sides, so what are we going to do? Well, I like to square off my bottom of the tote by, on the folded side, cutting out a square here and here. But you have to remember something. You're going to be sewing the side seams. You don't have to sew the bottom. The bottom is going to be flat like this. But you are going to be sewing the side seams. So when you square this off, you want to take into account the seam allowance that you're going to be using, which in my case is usually 1/4 inch, sometimes 1/2 inch, but let's pretend it's 1/4 inch seam allowance that you'd be sewing along this side. So you really want your square to start at that seam allowance. So when you cut these out, when you cut out your piece, you're going to be cutting out, say you want a 2-inch square. Well, this part, you're going to make it 2 1/4 inches when you cut. Just cut from the edge 2 1/4 inches. And then this would be 2 inches. And I think I do use 2-inch squares. I can't remember if I used 1 3/4 inches or 2 inches in the piece in the video. I like to, I play with the measurements a little bit sometimes, so I don't really know. But I typically do like the big wide bottoms, so 2 inches is a pretty good one for me, or 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 inches. Okay, so once you have that down, you have figured out what size square you want, you've taken into account your seam allowance, you can go ahead and cut those squares out of your piece. Need scissors for that. Okay, so we're going to cut our squares out of our piece of both our exterior and our lining. And what you have now looks like this. Okay, this is your giant piece. It's huge. Let's pretend it's huge, of your exterior fabric, and then one for your lining fabric. Okay, you're going to need some other things to go along with this. You're going to need your interior zipper, your exterior zipper, the main zipper, I guess you would call it, your handle connectors, which the handle connectors that I use end up looking a little bit like this. I put them on I put rectangle rings on them, and then I attach the handles to those rectangle rings. So if you want to make the handle connectors that I made, I will show you how I do it in the video, but you'll also need to download the handle connector, which I have not uploaded yet, to my website, so I'll get on that. But otherwise, you can use any handle connectors you want. You can use just plain old rectangles. You can just attach the handles directly if you wanted. It doesn't really matter. So you'll need something for your handle connectors, and you'll need something to make your handles, and I'll show you what I do in the video. And you'll need your hardware, your rectangle rings if you're using connectors. I use side connectors as well. You'll see those in the video. And you will also need a really good thing to have is double-sided leather tape. I use it constantly. I don't know where I would be without it, so definitely have that available. Wonder clips. Have wonder clips available. Have scraps of waterproof canvas if you're using waterproof canvas as your lining, or scraps of interfacing if you're using cotton. And D-rings for your side connectors if you are going to put side connectors on for a crossbody strap. And of course, if you're using a crossbody strap, you'll need the material to make that, as well as the swivel clips. I will list all of this stuff in the description of this video, but to start, let's start prepping our small pieces. Okay, we'll start with the handles. I usually use about 23 to 24 inch strip that is 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to tape down the center, which I've marked, and then fold the long edges into the center. And when we stitch this, we'll just fold it in half again and stitch along each long edge. Okay, these are my handle connectors. I have snips at the point where they angle outward, and I have double-sided tape lining the sides and the bottom. 1/4 inch double-sided tape because I'll be folding in the sides and bottom 1/4 inch. And now that everything's folded in, I'm going to take my D-ring, slip it on, and match the edges. So that top edge is matched to the folded up bottom edge of the connector. And I'm going to just use a little bit of leather tape to hold that in place, because I'll also be using that tape to stick that in the place that it belongs on the exterior of the bag. My one-piece exterior of the bag, and I have this piece that I use to help me place the connectors in the spots that they belong easily. So you can see probably that I have written on that piece 5 inches down. So I'm going to place that piece 5 inches down on the exterior from the top, and then make sure that it's lined up edge to edge and straight, and then I use those little marks that I have to align the bottom of my connector pieces, and there they are. And you're obviously going to do that on the other side of the exterior as well, so it'll be like they'll be mirroring each other. And now I use a scrap of waterproof canvas behind each one, so I'm going to just use a little tape to keep that in place behind each of the connectors. There you have them right there, so that when I sew, I'm sewing through that waterproof canvas for some support and to alleviate any stretch there might be in either one of the vinyls that I'm using. And just as an aside, I'll be doing the same thing within the seams of this bag. So you can see I have some scraps of canvas that I have cut about the length of the sides, and I'll be doing the same thing for the inner squares as well. And those will basically support my seam, and I'll be adding those as I sew, and I'll show you that when I'm doing it, but you might want to have them ready. So here we are with the handle connectors. I've already done the first 3. I'm just going to show you on the 4th. I'm sewing up close to the hardware. As you can see on the others, I have the waterproof canvas behind it. And I'm going to just sew close to the hardware and then around. Now, in case you want to try this method, I will turn and go backwards. So instead of turning and going stitching forward along this next side, I'll turn and I'll do a few backward, not a lot, just a few backward stitches just to clear that hardware. And then I'll turn it this way and go the rest of the way. And now the back foot is not sitting on top of that hardware, scuffing and ripping up my hardware. Okay, so that's another way that you can do that. You can either use something to sit in between there and make sure it doesn't get scuffed, or you can maybe try to turn it backwards. Sometimes stitch length is an issue. If your machine doesn't give you a consistent back stitch that's the same length as your forward stitch, that might not be something you want to do. But otherwise, that's a pretty good method for me. Just gonna go one more here, and okay. And now our handles are attached. Okay, now I'm just getting the handles that we prepped sewn up, and I'll just set them aside for later. Okay, I'm prepping a little key fob for inside the lining, just by folding the long edges in. If you've done my Perigee bag, it's the exact same thing. You're going to fold the edges in, slip your hardware on your swivel clip, and then fold the short edges together. Fold so that the short edges are matching, I should say, and then stitch around. I'll clip that in place real quick. Okay. Okay, this is that part where I was telling you I don't need to really do this on this part because it's not vinyl, it's not going to get scuffed up, and this hardware happens to be very thin, not as bulky. But if you wanted to, you could go backwards and backstitch a little bit just to get out of the way of the hardware and then turn it around. I'm not going to do that this time because this is fine. And there we go. Now our key fob for inside the lining is done. And I am going to start the zipper pocket and slip pocket. Okay, I'm just going to fold a scrap piece of about 1 to 1 1/4 inch wide vinyl that spans the width of my pocket over the top edge, with the fold not being quite even, so the front edge is going to be a little bit shorter than the back edge. That's to make stitching easy. Clipping it in place, and then I'm just going to top stitch along the edge of the binding. And when I'm finished, I'm just going to trim down the edges so that they match the edges of the pocket, just like this. Okay, so now you have your binding. It's a little wider in the back. You could trim it down if you want. I'm not gonna bother on this one. And then I'm gonna fold it so I could see the center crease there. Okay. And on whatever side of my lining piece that I'm placing it, I'm going to fold that so I can see the center crease there. And then I'm going to line up my folds. It's hard to see, so I'm gonna actually, like, it's hard for me to see. There we go. Now I want my slip pocket not all the way down towards the, like, past the bottom corners. I'm going to keep it up further because I don't want it to bend down into the bottom. I just don't want that. Okay, so that's that. That looks centered, and I think we're good. So now that I'm centered, I'm going to move it, and I'm just going to stitch around the entire pocket first before I decide what size smaller pockets I want, if I do at all. Okay. I think with this darker fabric, it's harder to see. But I'm just stitching a box around the entire pocket. And I think I've done this in another video too, so it would be exactly the same as any other bag that I put a slip pocket in. Okay. All right. Now I can decide, do I want to stitch down the middle and have 2 even pockets, or do I want to have one larger and one smaller for maybe pens? And I think actually I'm going to do 2 smaller pockets. I've decided. It has been decided. I'm just going to stitch down the middle. Caught under here. Because my slip pocket, because my zipper pocket is going to be fairly roomy, I think I've decided I wanted 2 small ones. I've done zipper pockets so many other times in other videos, and it's the exact same process. So I'm just going to speed through this and kind of give an overview of what I'm doing. I'm folding both the pocket piece and the lining piece to find the centers so that I can center the pocket piece right side down onto the right side of the main lining. And then I'm going to, about 1.25 inches down from the top of the pocket piece, draw a line from about 1/2 inch in to 1/2 inch in on the other side. And then another one about 1/2 inch down from that, making a rectangle connecting those lines. You can kind of see the pencil marking there. Now I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to sew along just the 2 long lines. Okay, once I've done that, I'm just folding it now so that I can easily snip into the center of that rectangle. And I'm doing a slit down the center of the rectangle up to about 1/2 inch before you reach the end of the rectangle. And then I'm going along the other side and doing the same thing. And it's a little hard to see, sorry about that, I didn't have the angle right. But I snipped through the center from 1/2 inch in to the other side 1/2 inch in. And now I'm pulling the pocket through. I'm pressing the seams out just to make it a little easier for them to sit well when I stitch this, top stitch it with the zipper behind it. So once it's pulled through, I'm just kind of pressing it down, trying to get it to where it's nice and flat. And then I'm stitching the zipper behind it, just top stitching all the way around the rectangle. Okay, and if you need a more in-depth tutorial on putting the zipper pocket in, I have this in both my honey bag video, my perigee bag videos, and I think even my swoosh 2.0 with the depth added video. I think they all do the zipper pocket a little bit slower if you need this in more detail. At this point, I'm just going to match the bottom edge of the zipper pocket to the top edge and pin that in place or clip it in place so that I can sew from the bottom corner of one side down the side, along the top, and down the other side, closing up the zipper pocket. And then I'm going to just open up that bottom, cut right along the bottom so that I've made an opening. And now I'm folding up the edges, and I'm going to stitch along the very corners, just on the corners, to keep that fold upward in place. And that will help me stitch the pocket closed later. Okay, I'm just going to baste my keyring clip in place onto the side of a lining piece. I don't really have a set amount down, maybe 2.5 inches, 2 inches down, just so that it clears the zipper there. And I'm just basting very, very close to the edge so that you don't see that stitching later. It'll be in the seam. The lining folded right sides together, and I'm just going to sew along the 2 side seams. And I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this one, but I'm coming in just a little bit as I get down to the bottom, or as I'm starting at the bottom, I'm starting a little more than that, just so that the lining fits well into the exterior. It's time to box the corners. We're pinching the corners open, flattening them down, and clipping them with Wonder Clips. And you can't really see past my pocket, but I'm just sewing again with about a little tiny bit more than a 1/4 inch seam for the lining. It'll be a 1/4 inch for the exterior. And I'm just going to do that to box both corners. Lining is complete, and we can put the lining and exterior together with the zipper. Okay, I'm getting ready to do the exterior. Sew the exterior together. I put my label on. I am going to fold it in half and match the top edges. And just come down and pin the sides in place. And here's where I'm going to be adding those scraps of waterproof canvas to the seams. I'm just adding this under the clips on both sides. So you could see the strip is going on one side. I'm going to clip it into place. I'm not being very exact. It just needs to be where I'm sewing. It doesn't need to be pretty or perfect. And then I'm turning it over, and I'm going to clip another strip. I keep scraps around all the time for this purpose on the other side. And that's what I'm going to sew through when I sew this, just to give the seams more stability. Okay. The whole idea being that this is the waterproof canvas is so strong and not stretchy at all that it'll just help support those seams a little bit. And I wouldn't do this for all vinyls necessarily. I have some marine vinyls that, like, literally I feel like need nothing. And I love this vinyl. This is, I get this vinyl printed, this particular one, knowing that I have to do this because I love the texture of the vinyl so much. Okay. Okay, so that's the sides. And then you're going to box the corners and do the same thing. You want to give the seams on the corners a little extra support. And we are now getting to the point where we're going to attach the zipper. Oh, a couple of things about making a bag like this with the one piece as your exterior. Don't do this with a directional fabric. You will not be happy with the results. One side will be upside down. I have variations of this. So this one, like you can see, I cut 2 pieces and I did add a bottom faux leather piece with purse feet and stuff like that. It's just a little fancier. And I did cut 2 pieces of this rather than use one large piece because I wanted the flowers to be directional. I wanted most of them to be facing upward. Almost forgot to add my crossbody strap connectors, so I'm doing that now. I've got 2 pieces about 1/2 inch wide by 4 inches, and I use tape to fold in the outer long edges. And now I have a D-ring that I'm going to slip on there and then fold over the D-ring into the center. And I'm actually going to stabilize this with a tiny bit of waterproof canvas as well. I didn't go crazy and put it inside before I folded it, because you're going to be stitching this through the seam, which also has waterproof canvas already in there. So there will be a lot of support for this. So I'm going to use a clip to hold this in place now and do the other one. And then we will attach them to the sides of the bags. Okay, it's hard to see right now, but I have the connector lined up so that the seam is running down the center, the side seam of the bag, and I'm stitching a box. You'll see it up close in just a minute. Okay. Oh, okay. Battery. Pressing, pushing the entire thing down. And I'm gonna go up to one side. And if I can, I'm going to turn this way so that I can actually get really close to that hardware, like that. And then, as I have in the past, I'm going to backstitch a couple stitches so that I can make sure that I'm clearing that hardware. I am pressed for time. Okay, so you stitched that crossbody connector into your seam. So you stitched through quite a bit of waterproof canvas already, and you've got some waterproof canvas in this connector. So this is going to be nice and sturdy now. Okay, and that's what it should look like. Okay, so you've got your bag like smushed down. You've got your connector there, and you measured it out. Mine ended up on the other side being about 1 3/4 inches, so that's where I put this one. Making sure the seam is centered and that it's pressed flat underneath. I'm going to start at the bottom. This kind of gives me a way to get it situated. Okay. All right, we have it sewn through all of this canvas underneath. We have canvas in the actual connector piece, so we're good to go. Okay, I had put snips on either side of this bag, and you can kind of see them. They're in the same place on the front and back of the exterior. And that's what I'm using. That's what I'll be using to kind of guide me in where I'm going to start turning my zipper out of the way on one side and and downward on the other side. And you'll see what I mean in just a minute. We're just lining that zipper up, zipper teeth down against the exterior of the bag right now on one side. Snip is on this side, and I'm just using that as my guide to know when I'll start pulling the zipper downward. And on this side, I'll be pulling the zipper using the Butler method out of the way. I'm just going to baste really close to the edge here just to get the zipper in place, starting somewhere in towards the middle, not at the very end of the zipper, because we'll have to turn over and go the other way to get to that other side. So starting here, I'm basting along. Just making sure that I'm not sewing through the other side of the bag. That would really stink. Okay, as you get to that last clip, you can turn the bag as you go. And as you get to that last clip, you start to look for that snip. And as you get there, that's when you're going to turn your zipper inward. Maybe just before the snip, maybe even. Inward towards the bottom of the bag this way, out of the way of the stitching, but then just keep stitching. Okay, and now you're gonna turn the bag this way, and when you get to your other snip, you're actually going to stop at that snip. Stop right where that snip is. I'm going to move my pull out of the way here. Hang on. Don't need to have that in the way. You're going to stop where that snip is. Leave your needle down, and I'll show you. I'll try to show you what I mean here. Leave the needle down at the snip, and then lift up your foot, but leave the needle down, and then swing that zipper back so you're bending it around the needle. Just bend it around the needle and keep going. Okay, and you should have now, so now this side should be facing upward. Okay, and this side should be facing downward. Okay, now open your zipper, put a clip or something on this end so that you don't zip off the end. Open your zipper, just open it. Now take it and twist it to where the top edge is meeting the top edge of the other side of the exterior with the zipper teeth facing down again. Okay, and now we're going to start pinning that zipper in place or clipping that zipper in place, but knowing that we're probably going to have to adjust it. As I clip the zipper in place, I'm kind of pulling on the end of the zipper with the pull and making sure that there is an even amount of zipper on both sides of the bag. And I'm going to do that by making sure that one, the seam is pulled straight so it's nice and even, and then that there's the same amount of zipper on both sides. And if there isn't, like there wasn't in this case, I'm going to readjust so that it is. And then I'm going to pull one more time and make sure that it is nice and straight. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other side, where I start somewhere sort of towards the middle of the zipper, basting the zipper on, and I'm going to baste to the end that has the Butler method. And that method I've used a couple times in other videos and showed you on the other side, where when you get to that snip that you made, that little snip to mark the spot on the bag, where you will leave the needle down, and then you will take the excess zipper and kind of fold it back around the needle, back behind the needle, and then keep stitching to stitch that zipper out of the way. So I'm getting to that point now where I'm leaving the needle down, folding the zipper back, out of the way, and then I stitch over it. And that folds that zipper up on that side. Now I'm turning it around and I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other side on this side, basting this zipper in place till I get to that snip on this side, that snip to mark where I'm going to pull the zipper downward. Now the zipper is underneath this time, so it's a little bit, it looks a little different, but it's the same idea. I'm pulling it down towards the bottom of the bag, out of the way of the stitching, and then I'm stitching over that. So the zipper should be facing downward on this side on both sides of the exterior. Okay, now it's time to turn the exterior inside out because we're going to be putting the lining inside of it. The lining will be right side out, so they'll be right sides together. Make sure your lining zipper pocket is open. Don't forget that. And line up the seams and make sure that the two seams where the zipper is sticking out, the zipper stays sticking out, and the seam where the zipper is actually heading downward towards the bottom of the bag, that it's out of the way of where you're going to be stitching. And then you're just clipping around. There I'm lining, nesting my seams there, and that zipper that's down in there is out of the way of this stitching. And I'm just clipping all the way around the top of the bag, and I'm going to stitch along the entire top of the bag with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance or close to the zipper teeth. Basically now just going around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And attaching the lining and exterior together to the zip. Making sure that my zipper is out of the way. The zipper that I have heading downwards is out of the way of my stitching. And just adjusting my bag as I go. Can't see yet again. There you go. Now this zipper that I'm coming around to, the one that I did the butler method on, sticks out and stays sticking out as I go along. Okay. This way now. Okay, so now we're attached at the top. Okay, I'm just going to turn the bag through the opening in the zipper pocket lining now. Push the lining down. sure that we have this. I'm going to put a little clip right here just to kind of keep that seam rolled the way I want it, because I'm going to be rolling the seam up here. We're going to be top stitching. See what we think here. Okay, just got to put the tab on and close up the pocket and put the handles on. So I'm going to attach it like this. Okay, and then I'm going to fold it over and fold it again, like so, so that it's double folded there, and top stitch across the top. And then I'll trim it up to meet the width of the zipper. Okay, to close up my pocket. Okay. My pocket is closed, and at this point it's just the handles. All right, here. Okay, and to attach the handles, I'm just folding them up over the rectangle rings and clipping them and then stitching a box around to secure them. And I only have one of the handles on video, but it's the same. You're gonna do this, what I'm doing right here, 4 times, twice on each side, and then you are just about done, unless you want to also make the crossbody strap to go with the optional crossbody strap connectors that we added. And I don't have that on this video, but I do have on, I believe it's my swoosh bag, maybe 2.0 video that you can look at to see how to make a simple crossbody strap to add. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, and I will show you the finished product in just a moment. Okay guys, here is the finished product. I was actually working on several different totes at once when I was doing this video, so this is the one that you saw on camera. It's stuffed right now to keep its shape, but this is it. I think it came out great. I actually left the zipper tail fairly long for what I normally do on this one, but I don't know, I kind of like having a long zipper tail sometimes to just hold on to when you're zipping your bag back up. But that's this one, and I was actually working on 2 others. I have this one here, where you can kind of get an idea of the little bit of a shorter, skinnier, more dainty tail there that I did. Has its crossbody strap added to it. And then we have this one here. Same idea. I think they all came out pretty well. Okay. Pretty happy with them. So that process yields pretty consistent results there. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'm gonna try as soon as I can to get the file up for you to be able to use these connectors if you want to. And again, there's variations to this where you will see the that I've done like a bottom panel. Maybe I've used 2 pieces instead of 1, but that's basically it.